Bible backgrounds, cultures. Welcome to Bible on the Go with Dr. Dan. You know, the Bible is an ancient book, and it has these two big divisions between the Old Testament and the New, and there are so many different cultures represented in Scripture we're going to talk about. But what it really boils down to is there's a big difference between studying the Old Testament and the New. For example, the Old Testament's written in Hebrew. Hebrew goes from right to left, backwards, at least to us who read things left to right. The New Testament's written in Greek, and Greek is vastly different because, for one thing, Greek has vowels. Hebrew doesn't have any vowels. It has pointers that the Masoretes put in. But I'm digressing. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of cultures in the Old Testament. And it's understandable because every single event that happened in the Old Testament took place on the face of the Fertile Crescent in the ancient Near East between Egypt, Palestine, and Mesopotamia. And so that adds to the cultural discussion. And when you think about it, it takes 4,000 years to get from Genesis to Malachi across the whole scope of the Fertile Crescent. But then when you come to the New Testament, it's only 90 years, not even 100 years for all the events that were described from Matthew to Revelation. And it's all in Palestine and the Greek islands because of Paul's missionary journeys. It's really different because here's the thing. In the New Testament, there's one culture, Greco-Roman. There's one language, Greek. And there's one big old government in charge, the Romans, with their efficient Roman road system and one universal language. But when we step into the Old Testament, wow, all the different cultures that are there. There is the world before the fall in Genesis 1 and 2. That was a completely different world, a perfect world of paradise. Then there's the world after the fall of man. And then the flood. And then the repopulation of the earth. So cultures changed and shifted. For example, a lot of people groups moved around on the earth as it's described in Genesis 10. And when we find Abraham in Genesis 12, he's slap in the middle of the Middle Bronze Age, and he's in the southern part of Mesopotamia with the Sumerian culture. And the Sumerians are the ones attributed that came up with writing in 3300 BC. And so we got the Sumerian culture, the Akkadian culture, the old Babylon under Hammurabi. And then as he moves forward, we start to discover all the other cultures on the other side of the Fertile Crescent, where you've got your Phoenicians in the northern part of Palestine and the Philistines on the coast. And of course, the people that are going to be taken over by the people of Israel after the Exodus. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm telling you, it's wild because when Joseph ends up being sold to some Ishmaelites in Genesis chapter 37 on the way to Egypt, and he ends up in Potiphar's house, now he's in this totally different culture, the Egyptian culture, which plays such a major role. But the Egyptian gods, the Egyptian culture, the Egyptian way of doing things is vastly different from what Abraham was used to in Sumer and Akkad during the Middle Bronze Age. And so Egypt then becomes a major player in Genesis and Exodus, of course, because the Pharaoh that doesn't know Joseph, when you come to the front of Exodus, then begins to put it together that he's got to do something about the Hebrews. And then when they leave, they've got to take over these other cultures that have a different god system of Baal worship and the Baal pantheon and all that goes on in Palestine. And then when you have the distinctly Israelite culture of Saul, David, and Solomon at 1000 BC, do you see how the vastness of the time and the cultures and the geography has such a crucial role in studying the Old Testament compared to the New. And then on the international stage, after the split of the kingdoms upon the death of Solomon, we have the Assyrians in northern Mesopotamia that are completely different from the Babylonians in southern Mesopotamia, and then are completely different from the great Persian kingdom that takes over all the Fertile Crescent, accentuating the return after the 70 years of exile of the southern kingdom, the last exile, first one being 722 with the northern kingdom, and then 586 with the southern. And so at all these places, we've got different cultures, different gods, different languages, and things that have to be considered as they interface with all of these. And so it just becomes a Bible study challenge and a Bible study adventure in the Old Testament. Again, all of that, 4,000 years compared to the New Testament, only 90, one culture, Greco-Roman, one language, and the New Testament simply reads more modern. So now we know a lot more about the cultures in the Bible and the payoff of studying the Old Testament when you take the time to think about the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, and I haven't even mentioned all the Edomites, Bashanites, Moabites on the Eastern Plateau. Thanks for watching Bible on the Go with Dr. Dan. If you like these videos, the best thing you can do is hit that red button called subscribe. You only have to do it once, and it doesn't cost a single thing. Praise God.